Hey guys, happy Sunday to you. I hope all is well. This is again, we're on the back nine of this thing, right? It's you didn't have anything due this week other than to read chapter 10, but be mindful this week you have quiz 4 on chapter 10, 11, and 12. So there's 2 chapters this week. Last week's was on relapse prevention. And this week is on special populations and diverse cultures. And I want to take a minute here to talk about that for a minute. It's super important. I had an old professor that would say, you don't get to choose the mix, God does, and we get to work with it, right? So you don't know who's going to call. You don't know who's going to walk through your office door or your facility door. You just have to be prepared to work with them. So many of you have probably already taken the multicultural counseling class. If not, you will. I used to teach that class. It was one of my favorites. It's real important. I'm going to give you a very real world example of how diverse cultures matter. Look, we don't have to know everything about every culture. It's impossible. But let's talk about culture very briefly. Many of us look at culture as race or ethnicity, and it's way bigger than that, right? In many cases, it's that too. But what about families have their own culture? Like I've lived in Tennessee, Texas, Oregon, and Alaska, and they all have their own cultures. Yes, it's you could say there's a bigger Western culture, right? Then you could say there's a United States culture. Then you could say there's each state, each city. Dallas and Austin and Houston are very different for that matter. We all have our cultures. Then my own family has their own subcultures even. Can't know everything about every culture, right? We just ask. You can't be expected to know, but here's where being culturally competent and working with special populations and diverse cultures matter. I worked with a lady from Nigeria once. She came in, and in my opinion, she needed to go to a detox unit to get off of alcohol. And she agreed. She knew she did. She'd been to one before. And she said, I can't go to treatment because I have a son and my husband travels. So my follow-up naturally was, well, do you have any family that could help in some way? And her eyes got as big as saucers. She said, oh, no. My family would disown me if they realized I had this issue. And I said, well, great, thank you for the information. Let's look for plan B then. She started crying immediately and said, you're the first counselor that's ever approached me that way. Everybody else wants to hammer me home with, well, the traditional recovery jargon, right? Like secrets keep us sick. And normally I would agree with that, with anybody else, with many other people anyway. And she proceeded to tell me about a clinician she worked with in an outpatient program previously. And I know the clinician, so I certainly believed what she was saying. And they're very 12-step oriented. And, she said he kept hammering me with, well, you got to tell him. Secrets keep us sick. This is how you're going to stay sick, and on and on and on. And that's just not okay, right? We have to meet her where she's at, not where we think she should be. So just my point in telling you that story is every culture is very different in how they view addiction and how they view problems within the family. So you can't just put everybody in a box and say, this is what you got to do. So just be real mindful of that when you're working with people. Again, I don't have to know everything about everybody. I need to know some basic things, sure, but I didn't know who was coming through the door. I didn't know she was from Nigeria until she got into my office. I, for example, worked with a Muslim lady who I went to shake her hand because that's what I do. I'm friendly. Hey, what's happening? She said, no. Forgive me. We don't shake hands. Great. Thank you. How would you like to be addressed? Simple as that. She let me know. We moved forward. It doesn't have to be this weird, awkward, I didn't know, oh my God thing. We're not expected to know everything, but we ask, how would you like to be greeted? So very important. I'm not going to spend any more time there because you have multicultural counseling courses to address these things, but it's something we're always working on because, again, you don't know who's coming through the door. And my point, again, to all those stories, both of those stories anyway, is you can't put everybody in a box. And it's super important in this recovery world that we tend to do that often. That's why I've sent you in 1300 to these other meetings so that you can get an ideal that there's not just one way to recover. There's not one way to get sober or clean, or use whatever language you like there, but you have to meet people where they're at, not where we think they should be or what we think works for them. So, man, we're really at the end of this thing already. And I know I've been saying that, it seems like for 8 weeks now, but it really is here. So this is your last quiz. And then you have one more DB next week on prevention. Then you have a week to work on, 2 weeks really, to work on your theories paper, which your instructions are in there, and it needs to be on one of 2 theories: motivational interviewing or cognitive behavioral therapy. I think it's chapter 7 that touched on it very briefly, so you'll have to do some work to do this, and it's like anything else. I think it's 2 to 3 pages, a couple resources. And I'll make a video next week talking about it a little more, but you have a whole 2 weeks to work on it. But it's worth a quarter of your grade too. So between the treatment plan and this, that's half your grade. I'm sure you'll do great at it, given all your work here. So then you're down to your last assignment, which is the reflection paper, which I talked a little bit about that in the other video for 1300. So I'm not going to run down that road again. I'm going to keep these videos short this week. Yeah, guys, so you're doing great overall, but you really are down to the wire. So as I mentioned in the other class, look at your point totals, or the other video for 1300. Look at your point totals, look at where you want to be. If you want to do extra credit, do it. If you don't. But it's there if you do. So guys, have a great week, and we'll talk soon.